A small boy sat in the corner of the kitchen, his hands shaking as he slowly sipped on the lukewarm soup, unaware that the glare of his stepmother's eyes would haunt him for the rest of his life. Lucas Everett, just 8 years old, had learned the hard way that food was a luxury. His fingers trembled as he held the spoon, the bowl barely containing the remnants of the meal he had been allowed. The soup was lukewarm now, the once steaming liquid reduced to an unforgiving temperature that mirrored the coldness of his home. It tasted like nothing, and he could barely stomach it. But this wasn't about the food. It was about the silence that hung thick in the air, the suffocating stillness that always followed Carla's outbursts. Earlier that day, at the family's dinner party, Carla had scalded him with hot soup in front of his classmates, all because he had dared to ask for a second helping, because he had wanted to feel full like the other children. It wasn't his fault he was hungry, but to Carla it was an offense worth punishing. Lucas could still hear the echoes of Carla's shrill voice cutting through the air. "Eat your leftovers and don't dare ask for more. You don't deserve anything." The words seemed to linger, sharper than the pain on his skin, heavier than the shame pressing down on his chest. Henry, his father, had been absent again, off on another business trip, leaving Lucas with Carla, the woman who had once promised to take care of him, but who now only seemed to make him smaller every day. Lucas's hands throbbed as he slowly sipped from the bowl, but he kept his head down, focusing on the soup and nothing else. If he stayed invisible enough, maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't notice him. Carla's cold gaze never wavered as she stood near the kitchen counter, her sharp eyes tracking Lucas's every movement. She wore a perfect smile, but it was the smile of someone who knew they held power over a broken soul. To anyone who might have looked in from the outside, they appeared the perfect family, a successful, happy home. But in the dim light of the kitchen, Lucas knew better. He was nothing but an inconvenience to her. The cold soup burned his throat as he tried to force another spoonful down. His hands were unsteady. He could feel her eyes on him, always watching, always waiting for the moment he slipped, the moment she could strike. "Don't you dare waste it," Carla snapped suddenly, her voice cutting through the stillness. "If you ruin another meal, I'll make sure you never eat again. Do you hear me?" Lucas's heart raced, and he quickly nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He didn't want to make her angrier. He didn't want to see that look in her eyes again, the look that said he wasn't worthy of being in her house, that he didn't belong. Carla turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Lucas alone. He didn't dare look up, didn't dare breathe too loudly. He knew his place in this house, and it wasn't at the table with everyone else. It wasn't anywhere at all. And before we go any further, if you've ever witnessed an injustice like this or felt helpless in a similar situation, hit that like button, comment, and share your thoughts below. And Henry Everett, Lucas's father, had always been a distant figure in his son's life. A successful architect, Henry's career consumed most of his time, leaving him little room for anything else. He worked long hours, took endless business trips, and rarely made time to truly connect with Lucas. The few conversations they had were strained, full of awkward silences, and when Henry was home, he was often too exhausted to notice the subtle signs of neglect, the bruises that were carefully hidden, or the tired eyes that begged for a father's love. Carla, on the other hand, had a charm about her. She knew how to manipulate people, how to make them see what she wanted them to see. To Henry and their friends, Carla appeared to be the perfect stepmother. She was elegant, poised, always in control of the situation. But behind closed doors, that control was maintained with cruelty. It wasn't just neglect. It was an active, calculated effort to make Lucas feel as small as possible, to push him down until he no longer mattered. Lucas didn't understand it. He had only been a child when Carla had entered his life, and at first, he had tried to welcome her. But she made it clear from the very beginning that she didn't want him. He was a reminder of a life she didn't want to remember, of a mother she would never replace. As the days passed, Lucas found solace in his drawing book. It was the one place where he could express what he couldn't say. He filled the pages with drawings of windows with locked panes, people staring out, their mouths closed, their eyes vacant. He drew figures standing in the dark, not a single smile or sign of warmth in sight. In his drawings, Lucas captured the quiet, suffocating isolation he felt every day. And yet, there was a small part of him, hidden deep inside, that still clung to hope. He whispered to himself every night as he tried to fall asleep in the dark corner of his room. One day someone will come. Someone will take me away from here. But Lucas never truly believed it. He couldn't. His world had been shaped by silence and cruelty for too long. Carla's cruelty was subtle at first, small passive-aggressive comments that seemed almost insignificant. But over time, the little insults and humiliations began to add up. It wasn't just the food, though that was the most obvious form of punishment. It was everything. The way she looked at him like he was less than human. The way she ignored him in front of others, as if he were invisible, a ghost walking through her house. Lucas had learned to avoid her gaze. He never spoke unless spoken to. He ate in silence, did his chores in silence, and went to bed in silence. When Henry was home, Carla's behavior changed. She was perfect in front of him, always the loving, dutiful wife. But as soon as he left for work, the mask came off, and Lucas was left to endure whatever cruelty Carla had in mind for the day. One evening after a small family gathering, Carla ordered Lucas to clean the entire house. Henry had left for another business trip, and the guests had long since departed. Carla was angry about the way Lucas had been acting, the way he hadn't contributed enough, hadn't done enough. "You think you're special, don't you?" she hissed as she handed him the cleaning supplies. "I'm going to make you work so hard, you'll never ask for a second helping of anything again." Lucas's legs trembled as he took the mop and bucket. His body ached from the day's punishment, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to speak up. He had learned long ago that doing so only made things worse. As he scrubbed the floors, his back aching, he tried not to think about how his life had become this, how every moment of every day felt like a battle to survive. Carla's voice echoed in the background, a constant reminder of what he was in her eyes. Nothing. Yet Lucas scrubbed the floor with slow, deliberate movements, his body exhausted, his mind elsewhere. The pain from the earlier burn still lingered on his hands, but he focused on the motion of his work, the circular motion of the mop, the way the water swirled around the floor as he pushed it along, hoping the minutes would pass faster. But no matter how quickly he worked, it never seemed enough for Carla. She stood in the doorway watching him, her arms crossed and her lips curling into a sneer. You're still not finished? Her voice was cold and sharp. I told you to clean everything, everything. Lucas swallowed hard, trying to keep the panic from rising in his chest. He didn't dare to look up at her, knowing that would only make it worse. Instead, he nodded, his voice barely a whisper. I'll finish, Carla, I promise. Don't you dare speak to me in that tone again, she snapped, stepping closer, her heels clicking menacingly on the floor. You are worthless. Can't even do a simple job like this without messing it up. Her words stung more than any physical punishment. But Lucas said nothing. He couldn't. Saying anything would only anger her further. The room felt colder as Carla towered over him. Her shadow stretched across the floor, dark and foreboding. Lucas wanted to disappear. He wanted to be anywhere else. The smell of cleaning products mixed with the scent of stale food, making him dizzy. The house felt like a prison, and every day he spent there chipped away at whatever hope he had left. He tried to keep his mind focused on his drawings, the only thing that kept him from losing his grip on reality. His drawing book was his secret escape, the place where he could let his mind wander and imagine a life beyond these walls. He imagined a home full of laughter, a place where he could be himself, where he could feel safe. But those thoughts were always fleeting, like a dream that faded when you woke up. Reality was far harsher than anything he could dream up. Get back to work, Carla ordered, her voice pulling him back to the present. Don't stop until it's done, or I'll make sure you regret it. Next that night, after the endless cleaning and the scolding, Lucas finally crawled into bed, his small body sore from the day's labor. The sheets felt cold and rough against his skin. He had learned to live with discomfort, but tonight, it seemed heavier than ever. His eyes fluttered shut, but sleep didn't come easily. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with the same thoughts that always lingered at the edge of his consciousness. Was this all he would ever know? A life of cruelty, a life of neglect? Would he ever escape this? Would anyone ever come for him? He thought about his father, Henry. Henry had always been distant, always preoccupied with his work. But there had been moments when Lucas remembered the faint warmth of his father's smile, the rare fleeting moments when Henry would hold him, telling him he was proud of him. Those moments were the only things that kept Lucas from completely breaking. But they were so rare, so distant, like memories of a life that never truly existed. Lucas shifted, pulling his drawing book from under his pillow. The paper felt rough against his fingertips as he opened to the last page. He began sketching once again. Figures, shadows, windows. People trapped behind bars. Their mouths shut tight, their eyes wide with fear. He didn't know why he drew these things. He didn't understand the constant need to draw locked windows, to draw people who couldn't escape. But as the pencil moved across the paper, it felt like the only way to make sense of everything. It was his only outlet, his only chance to feel like he had some control over his life, even if just for a moment. The next day, when Nathan Blackwell arrived at the Everett home, he could immediately sense that something was wrong. He had known Henry for years, and although they weren't close, they shared a bond of mutual respect. But Nathan had started to notice things. Small things. The way Henry spoke about his son, like he was just another responsibility, something to be managed rather than loved. The way Carla treated Lucas, always cold, always dismissive. Nathan couldn't ignore it any longer. He had seen the bruises on Lucas's arms before, the signs of neglect that were too subtle for Henry to notice. But not for Nathan. He had seen enough in the brief moments when Carla had let her guard down to know that something was terribly wrong. When Nathan arrived at the house that day, he wasn't expecting the scene that greeted him. Carla was in the kitchen preparing a meal, her smile plastered on her face. But it didn't take long for Nathan to notice Lucas, sitting at the table, his face pale, his body stiff. The boy was trying to act normal, trying to make himself small and invisible. But Nathan could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes avoided meeting anyone's gaze. It wasn't the first time Nathan had visited, but today, something was different. Lucas wasn't just quiet. He was withdrawn, distant. He had been like this for months, but today it felt heavier. As Nathan greeted Henry and Carla, he made sure to keep an eye on Lucas. He didn't want to draw attention to the boy, but he couldn't help it. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. It wasn't long before Nathan's suspicions began to grow. During dinner, Carla made a pointed comment about Lucas's lack of manners when he hesitated to take a bite of the meal she had prepared. Lucas seemed to shrink even further into his seat. Nathan saw the look on Carla's face, a look that was hard to place but unmistakable in its intent. It was cold. When Henry turned his attention to a work call, Nathan saw his opportunity. He moved closer to Lucas, sitting beside him at the table. He leaned in slightly, keeping his voice soft and calm. "Lucas," Nathan began gently, "is everything okay?" Lucas looked up at him, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. It was clear he wasn't used to someone asking. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but nothing came out. Nathan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can tell me, Lucas. If something's wrong, you can tell me." For a moment, Lucas didn't say anything, but then, with a small, shaky voice, he whispered, "I don't want to go back to my room." Nathan's heart sank. He wanted to do something to fix it, but he didn't know how. How could Henry not see? How could he not know? That night, as Nathan lay in bed, he couldn't stop thinking about Lucas. The boy was clearly trapped, and unless someone did something, he would remain trapped in this nightmare. Nathan had known for a while that something wasn't right, but this was different. The look in Lucas's eyes haunted him. Nathan knew it was time to take action, but the question was, how? The following morning, Nathan woke up with a sense of urgency that gnawed at him. He couldn't get Lucas's voice out of his mind. "I don't want to go back to my room." The boy's words echoed in his head, a silent scream that pushed Nathan to act. He had seen enough. He couldn't ignore the truth any longer. Nathan had always prided himself on being a man of action, but he'd never been in a situation quite like this. The thought of confronting Carla sent a shiver down his spine. He had seen the way she had manipulated Henry, the way she controlled every situation with ease. Carla had a way of making everyone believe she was the perfect wife, the perfect mother. No one questioned her. No one challenged her. But Nathan couldn't stay silent anymore. Lucas was suffering, and someone had to stand up for him. After breakfast, Nathan excused himself from the Everett's home, telling Henry he needed to run some errands. He had to get things in motion, and that meant speaking to someone who could help him. He called Margaret Stone, a family law attorney who specialized in child protection cases. Nathan had known Margaret for years, but he had never needed her services until now. "Margaret, I need your help," Nathan said, his voice tense, the weight of the situation heavy in his chest. There's something going on with Henry's son, Lucas. I think he's being abused, and I don't know what to do about it. Margaret's voice was calm, but Nathan could hear the concern underneath. What makes you think that? I've seen the bruises, the way Carla treats him, the way Lucas withdraws every time Carla's around. It's not right, Margaret. I can't sit by and watch this happen. But I need proof. I need something concrete. Margaret paused for a moment. You're right to be concerned. If you have any evidence, we can take action. I'll get the ball rolling, but you need to act quickly. These cases can take time, and children are in danger in the meantime. Are you ready for that? I am, Nathan replied without hesitation. I can't just sit here anymore. Margaret's voice softened. Good, I'll help you get everything in order. Let's talk strategy. I'll be in touch soon. Nathan ended the call, his mind racing. He knew he had to act fast. The longer he waited, the more at risk Lucas became. He needed to get the truth to Henry, but he had to have concrete evidence first, and he knew just where to start. That evening, Nathan returned to the Everett home, determined to gather the evidence he needed. Carla was out at a social event, and Henry was sitting in his study, buried in work. Nathan knew it would be the perfect opportunity to make his move. He slipped into the kitchen, his eyes scanning the room. He moved carefully, silently, looking for anything that could give him the proof he so desperately needed. His eyes landed on the pantry. Lucas's food was stored there, but the shelves were nearly empty, save for a few cans of soup and some dried pasta. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Then his eyes fell on something more troubling. A small plate, hidden under the kitchen counter, just barely out of sight. It was cold, covered with a thin layer of dried food. Lucas's leftovers from the night before, most likely. The boy had been eating scraps again, just like always. Nathan felt a surge of anger, a fire igniting in his chest. This was it. This was the proof he needed. But it wasn't enough. He needed more. Nathan's eyes swept over the room, taking in every detail. He moved quietly to the living room and started looking through Lucas's drawing book, the one that the boy kept hidden under his pillow. His heart sank as he flipped through the pages. The drawings were heartbreaking, figures locked behind bars, their mouths closed, their eyes staring out in silent desperation. He found one drawing that particularly struck him. A figure with shackles, its arms and legs bound tightly. The boy had drawn himself, and the chains symbolized everything he had felt in his short, painful life. Nathan's stomach twisted in knots. How could Henry not see this? How could he not see what was happening right under his nose? Before he could look at anything else, he heard footsteps approaching. He quickly closed the book and tucked it back under the pillow. Henry stepped into the room, his face weary from another long day of work. Nathan, what's going on? Nathan turned to face him, forcing a calm expression onto his face. Henry, I need to talk to you about something important. It's about Lucas. Henry raised an eyebrow. What about Lucas? Nathan took a deep breath, his heart pounding. Henry, I think there's something going on with Carla. I think Lucas is being abused, and I don't think you know the full extent of it. Henry frowned, clearly surprised by the accusation. What are you talking about? Carla loves Lucas. She's always been good to him. Nathan shook his head. No, Henry, that's not true. I've seen it. I've seen the bruises, the way Carla treats him. And Lucas, he's scared, Henry. He's terrified. Henry's face turned red. You're wrong. I don't know what you're trying to do here, but Carla would never hurt Lucas. Nathan stepped forward, his voice firm. I've gathered evidence, Henry. I've seen it for myself. The way Carla treats him, the way she isolates him, the way she makes him feel worthless. Henry's eyes narrowed. What evidence? Nathan paused, looking at Henry with a deep sense of urgency. I have a recording, and I have a witness. But I need you to listen. I need you to hear the truth. Henry stood motionless, his eyes searching Nathan's face. For a long moment there was only silence. Then Henry sighed deeply, his shoulders slumping. Show me. Before we continue, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. This story is far from over, and we need your support to get it out to more people. Let's continue to stand up for what's right. As Nathan pulled out the USB drive he had hidden in his pocket, the one that contained the audio recording of Carla's voice. It wasn't just her cruelty he needed to expose. It was the full extent of what she had done. He handed the drive to Henry, his hands shaking slightly. Henry plugged it into the laptop, his face slowly transforming from confusion to shock as the recording played. Carla's voice was unmistakable, clear in her cruelty. Her words, spoken so casually, sent a chill down Henry's spine. The recording began with Carla's cold tone. Just let him eat the scraps. It's all he deserves. Maybe then he'll learn his place in this house. Henry's face went pale as he listened. His hands trembled as he rewound the recording to play it again. Oh my God, he muttered. I had no idea. Nathan watched Henry's face change, the reality of what had been happening slowly sinking in. Henry, I know this is hard to hear, but Lucas has been suffering in silence for so long. He needs you now. He needs your help. Henry didn't respond immediately. He simply stared at the screen, the weight of everything falling on him at once. His life, his marriage, everything he had believed in was crumbling before him. The Henry sat still, his gaze fixed on the laptop screen. His mind was racing, trying to process the harsh reality that had just unfolded in front of him. The woman he had married, the woman he had trusted to take care of his son, had been hiding a terrible secret. A secret that had been eating away at his family for months, maybe longer. How could I not see this? Henry muttered to himself, his voice thick with disbelief. He had been blind. He had been absent, lost in his work, leaving Lucas vulnerable to the woman who had made his life a living hell. Nathan could see the guilt eating away at him, but now wasn't the time for regrets. It was time for action. You weren't there, Henry, Nathan said quietly, his voice firm but compassionate. But now you are. Now you have to do something about it. Lucas needs you to protect him. You're his father. You are the one who can make it stop. Henry swallowed hard, blinking back the tears threatening to fall. The weight of everything he had failed to see, everything he had failed to protect, was too much, but there was no time to wallow in guilt. You're right, Henry finally said, his voice steadying. I can't let this go on. I'll do whatever it takes to protect him. Nathan nodded, his expression resolute. We need to act quickly. I've already contacted Margaret Stone. She's preparing the legal case, but we need to move fast before Carla can cover her tracks. Henry's eyes hardened with determination. I won't let her get away with this. Later that evening, the confrontation took place. Carla had no idea what was coming. Nathan, Henry, and Lucas were all seated in the living room, a tense silence hanging in the air. Henry's face was pale, his fists clenched tightly in his lap. Nathan sat beside him, his presence a quiet support as they waited for Carla to return. When the door opened, Carla stepped inside, her smile faltering slightly when she saw the serious expressions on the men's faces. She paused for a moment, her gaze darting between them, then quickly regained her composure. "Why the long faces?" Carla asked, her voice dripping with feigned sweetness. "Is something wrong?" Henry stood up, his body tense with rage. "Carla," he began, his voice shaking with emotion. "I know everything. I know what you've been doing to Lucas." Carla's face blanched for just a split second before she quickly masked her reaction. "What are you talking about, Henry?" Her voice was sweet, too sweet, like honey laced with poison. "You've been working too hard. You're imagining things." "No, Carla." Henry shot back, his voice firm. "I'm not imagining anything. I've heard it from Lucas, and I've seen the evidence. I know what you've been doing to him, and I can't let it go on anymore." Carla's eyes flashed with a mix of anger and fear. She quickly turned to Nathan as if to plead for his support. But Nathan was already standing, his arms crossed in a silent show of solidarity with Henry. "You've been abusing him, Carla," Nathan said, his voice cold. "And we've got the proof." Carla's face twisted in fury. "This is ridiculous," she spat. "You're going to believe them? This is my home. I'm his mother. I know what's best for him." "No, Carla, you don't," Henry said, his voice unwavering. "You've manipulated me, and I've let it go on for far too long. I failed Lucas, but I'm not failing him anymore. You need to leave. Now." Carla's hands balled into fists, her nails digging into her palms as she struggled to maintain control. "You think you can just throw me out? You think you can just take everything from me?" she hissed, her voice rising. "You can't do this. You're nothing without me." Henry took a step forward, his eyes cold and resolute. "No, Carla. You're nothing without us. You've taken advantage of my trust, of my son's vulnerability, and you've made both of us suffer. Now it ends." Carla's face twisted in rage, but there was no denying the fear in her eyes now. She had underestimated Henry for far too long. The man who had been absent was finally standing up, and Carla knew she was losing her grip on everything she had worked so hard to control. With a final venomous glance, Carla turned on her heels and stormed out of the house, her heels clicking on the floor like the ticking of a clock, counting down the last moments of her power. Henry let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. His knees felt weak, but he held himself up. For the first time in years, he felt like he had done something right. He had protected his son. With Carla gone, Henry and Lucas were left in the quiet aftermath. The weight of everything they had been through hung in the air, but the silence now felt different. It was no longer suffocating. It was the silence of a new beginning. Lucas had retreated to his room after the confrontation, his small body curled up on the bed. But as Henry knocked on his door, Lucas's quiet voice called out, "Come in." Henry stepped inside, his heart aching as he saw his son sitting in the middle of the bed, holding his drawing book in his hands. Lucas looked up, his eyes still guarded, but there was something different about him. There was a flicker of hope in his eyes that Henry had never seen before. "Hey, buddy," Henry said softly, sitting down beside him. "You okay?" Lucas nodded slowly, his lips trembling as if he was fighting the tears that had been building up for so long. He clutched the drawing book to his chest, his fingers tracing the worn pages. "Dad, I was so scared," Lucas whispered, his voice barely audible. "I thought you wouldn't believe me. I thought you wouldn't care." Henry's heart shattered. He reached out, pulling Lucas into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry, Lucas. I should have been there for you. I'll never let that happen again. You have my word." Lucas nodded against his father's chest, his body trembling as he let the tears fall. "Thank you, Dad. I didn't think anyone would ever come for me." Henry stroked his son's hair gently, tears filling his own eyes. "You don't have to be afraid anymore. You're safe now, Lucas. You're home." 1 year later, Lucas sat at the kitchen table, his eyes brighter than ever before. The kitchen was no longer cold and sterile. It was warm, filled with the sounds of laughter and love. Henry had kept his promise. He was home more often, spending weekends fishing with Lucas, working on home projects together, and most importantly, rebuilding the relationship they had both lost. Lucas no longer ate in secret. He sat at the dinner table with his father, sharing meals with a quiet joy. His drawing book had changed too, no longer filled with dark, locked figures. Now the pages were filled with colorful scenes of nature, of family, and of hope. And every night before bed, Lucas would whisper to himself, "I'm not alone anymore." As the final chapter of Lucas's journey closes, we are reminded that even in the darkest moments, there is always a way out when someone steps in with love and courage. Henry's transformation from distant father to protector shows that it's never too late to change. Lucas's bravery to speak out, despite his fears, opened the door to his healing, and together, they built a life that was full of warmth and hope. But the story doesn't end here. The question we leave with you is this: where do you see yourself in this story? Are you like Henry, finally seeing the truth and stepping up for what's right, or like Lucas, overcoming fear to reclaim your voice? Maybe you've been that quiet child, longing for someone to stand up for you. Or perhaps you've been that silent observer, waiting for the right moment to act. If you were Lucas, would you have believed that someone would come for you? What would you do today to be that someone for someone else? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because your words might just be the encouragement someone else needs to find their strength. And if this story moved you, don't forget to share it. You never know who might need to hear it today. Thank you for being with us through this journey. Every like, comment, and share gives us the motivation to continue telling these healing stories. Together we can make a difference, one story at a time.